There we go. Good morning, everybody. So another LinkedIn Live. Those of you that have been joining over the last few sessions will know me. In a moment, I will formally introduce my guest. But it's as it's a Friday, I always call it a fun Friday. So do let us know in the comments. Put a nice fun hello in there, just so that we know that you're here, because that's the frustrating thing. Sometimes with LinkedIn Lives, we can't actually see any of our audience. So we do rely on, I know we've got at least one guest because he sat in the other room, and that's my other half, our business partner. So I know we're actually absolutely not talking to ourselves, but welcome to those of you that have joined us. And you may be expecting a different guest. Those of you that know Sue Reed, and we're expected to see Sue. Just to explain that due to personal circumstances, Sue wasn't able to join. But I've got an absolutely awesome guest who's been very kind without much notice to step in this morning, which is my guest, Debbie Barrows. So Debbie, I know from your LinkedIn headline, you are award-winning, you're a trainer, you're a speaker, you're a coach, you're a writer, and the interesting bit, you're a traveller as well. So if we get time this morning in this 30 minutes, I'm going to sort of pick your brains in terms of your travel as well. So welcome, Debbie, and over to you, really, just to give a little bit more of an introduction about yourself.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jackie. And I see that we've both got flowery backgrounds, so that works well for a Friday. And thanks for inviting me this lastminute.com exercise. I'm Debbie Barrow. I'm the managing director of a training company called Varada Training. And for 22 years, we focused entirely on B2C organizations, where they have staff which interact directly with customers, either in a selling or a service concept, and it could be face-to-face, writing, or on the phone. That is the focus. And my real passion is having really good personalized conversations with customers, whether you're selling them something or whether you're serving. It's all nice and calm and relaxed. Sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it is, but to try to make it as personal and human as possible. And we also train the managers and the team leaders who help their staff to do that.
And that's why I'm so excited to have you on board, because I know we're very similar in terms of what we do and our passion for service excellence. So I guess it'll be a challenge this morning to keep it within the sort of 30 minutes. I know once we both get started on a topic we're really passionate about, Debbie, we might be there for until 1 o'clock this afternoon, but we won't do that. We will try and keep it to the 30 minutes for everybody. But before we get started, again, if you're here with us at the moment, do pop a quick hello in the comments, just so that we can say hello back. And of course, if you have any questions as well, we do welcome those questions to come in, so that we can then hopefully you'll go away having the answers to those important issues that you may be facing within your organization. But what we are going to be talking about today is a very important topic, which is around handling difficult customer interactions. And I think a good starting place, while I flip my hair in the way, a good starting place, I think, Debbie, would be if you'd like to sort of share with the audience your experience in terms of the difficult conversation in interactions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you, Jackie, I don't like to train anything unless I've actually done it myself and handled all those challenges. So I think my first experience was from the age of 18, selling double glazing from a phone book, just cold calls back in the day, just randomly picking up names. And obviously not everybody was happy at being called at 7 o'clock at night. So sometimes that would be quite difficult from that perspective. The other thing that I really got a lot from was when I was an area service manager. I dealt all the time with complaints. That's all I dealt with 90% of the day. And also on top of that, it was in Yorkshire and it was in industry. So it was very, very common for me to turn up because these people, the companies hadn't had their delivery of overalls for the steel metal workers or the industrial workers. And I would turn up being a woman. And the amount of times that I was told, I don't want a woman here, go and get me Mike. And I thought, I am really up for this challenge. I said, well, I could definitely get Mike. He can come here on Friday. I'm here now. If you give me 15 minutes, I think I can solve this problem in 15 minutes. Are you want to take that on? And they said, yeah, that's fine. And I would always handle it in 15 minutes. So I found my own Yorkshire way of dealing with that. But I think the job that I did, which I think everybody should do, is as a travel rep in Mallorca, of all places, and Paris and Switzerland too. But definitely my job was working between 60 and 90 hours a week at airports, at resorts, handling difficult customer situations, which often people would have been delayed for up to 22 hours. So we as reps would have to sleep in the airport for 22 hours because we had to stay in case the flight came in. So we had this barrage of passengers come in, and you can imagine they were not at all happy. I heard every swear word I could ever have imagined and more. And that was on a daily basis. Not only did they get delayed, there was never any air conditioning on the coach for a 3-hour journey with vomiting children. And by the time they got there, they arrived at their resort with the cranes still building the apartments. And it was actually featured on Holidays from Hell. So I was the person that resolved those complaints. And funnily enough, out of 330 reps, my apartments had the worst situations, but I had the best customer service out of the 333 reps. So I hadn't had any training on doing it. So it was really interesting. I managed to figure out a way to make things easier for them and ultimately me as well. That's probably the best experience. Yeah.
That's a lot of experience, and particularly I would imagine, very tough dealing with complaints on a daily basis. And you said in terms of, obviously it was more, I guess, learning on the job rather than the training. But if you could go back in time, what ideally would you have liked to have happened? Were you happy with it being mainly on the job experience?
I think because I'd come from a service background before and in the Yorkshire area and in industry, I'd had a little bit more experience at getting ready for that kind of thing, and not all reps had. And I remember the time when the first major delay came in. We'd only been in the job for about 3 days, and I could predict the reps that would crumble before the doors even opened, with the customers coming, the guests coming out. And it was in their preparation for it, their anticipation of problems. And what they were doing is worrying about how it was going to be for them. Yeah. What I decided I wanted to focus on was what's going to come through. How awful is it that they've been delayed that long? How really bad is it for families with young children that have run out of nappies or medication because they didn't realize everything went through in the suitcase? And I had 100% empathy for them in that situation. I didn't think about me at all, because actually they were the most important one. And I truly believe that to be the case. I didn't just, think, well, I'll have to put on a smiley face and hope for the best. They had to feel that I got them. So if they said, this has been a really bad experience, I'd say, it sounds terrible. I would actually I would empathize even more. So I wanted to empathize first so they could really, truly trust me and say, let's get you on the coach and let's get you there. So moving quite from empathy to action. But importantly, I'd had a really good boss in my previous job, and I watched how he handled customers. And I had the benefit and the pleasure of having a manager who had a belief that customer was the most important thing in our business. And I think that for me was the saving grace. I had a great role model.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? That managers, have that mindset about the importance of the customer, and they lead the way, they lead by example. And so, yes, having that person there, that role model you talked about to learn from is equally important, isn't it? And you've obviously talked about the importance of empathy, and we will talk more about that shortly, because one of my biggest bugbears is those scripts that sometimes are trained out. Say this when a customer's in this situation, or say this, and that's not what empathy is about, is it? So we will definitely explore more around the empathy side of things. But in terms of handling those difficult interactions, how important do you think it is for business to ensure that they're staff are equipped and have the skills and the confidence to handle those difficult conversations in the right way? And why do you think is particularly important right now?
I think whenever we offer customer service training, Jackie, and you probably find this as well, if you ask the staff, what are the most important things you want to learn on a customer service program? Number one, hands down, is always handling difficult customers, handling complaints. So that's the first thing they want. And then when you're in the training room with them, they really want to focus as much time as possible. How do you deal with a shouting customer? How do you deal with abuse? How do you deal with people that are not listening to you? And it's actually, that's changed a lot in the last 30 years because, you know, we've been doing this a long time, haven't we? Back in the day, whenever you did training 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. You were covering the fundamentals of customer service and what customers want and asking the right questions and that kind of thing. And just a little bit of time on complaints. It's completely changed. And I think what's happening a lot is because automation in contact centers is taking over. And the trends are, you know, as you know, that by the time people actually get through all of that, they are beside themselves. So it's really important. And I think what's often overlooked with certainly training on this kind of topic is that resilience is really needed for staff. Is how do that, you cannot change a customer by waving a magic wand. You can't wish they were different or hope they were different. You get what you get, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone. That exists. And it's really seems to be much harder now because there are more customers that are willing to complain than ever before. Back in the late 80s, I think surveys in 88 in Britain said that only 4% of customers would complain. 96% of people would just go somewhere else. The last survey I saw by the Institute of Customer Service said that was 60% of customers are willing to complain, but that was back a few years ago, so it's probably changed now. So people are more willing to complain now. Society is different. We've got less time. We've got more legal support should we want to complain. There's Ofcom and all the other regulatory bodies, and there's more competition. So customers are more likely to complain, which means people, you know, in service providers get more complaints, but the level of resilience isn't as it could be. And I think rather than smile down the phone and is there anything else I can help you with and all those things, it needs to be much more about what is your response, what is your reaction to these difficult customer situations. I think that's often lacking, but it's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And, you know, again, you know, we've both got, to say, that 30 years experience. And one of the most common things, I think, when I talk to, you know, when I'm delivering training and I'm talking to customer service teams, the first thing when we start talking about difficult conversations, it's usually that customer that's really angry, is shouting, abusive. And the first thing I often hear from staff is, but I don't get paid to deal with that.
Yeah.
And again, you know, it is, you know, we will talk about the do's and don'ts, particularly of handling those type of conversations, because yes, I agree to some degree that we don't go into work wanting to be shouted at, etc. But also, a very wise manager said to me many years ago in my career, you do not know what else is going on in that customer's life because they won't share it with you. Why should they share it with you? But that customer, they may be shouting. If you knew, for example, they had a recent bereavement in their family, if you knew, for example, that they were fear of losing their home because they can't keep up with their mortgage payments, they have financial difficulties, etc., then it's not necessarily that one thing that has tipped them into being particularly angry in that conversation. It's probably lots of other things that are going on in their life. And I remember that conversation she had with me, and it just, I think as a youngster back in the day, it just helped me to have a bit more understanding of what I might not know. Some customers will divulge everything, but the majority that won't. But actually just trying to understand more from their perspective, rather than taking that stance, well, hang on a second, I don't get paid enough to be shouted at. So having that empathy that we've talked about, for me, was, I think, the starting place in the early days of my career of just having a little bit more understanding, a lot more tolerance and patience, and really trying to think about it from a customer's perspective. And you've talked about, the UK Customer Service Institute. And I'm sure, therefore, that one of the reports you were talking about is the 6 monthly report that they provide. And I know January this year, the sort of satisfaction index had dropped by, I think it was around 1.6, 1.7 points. And it's the lowest it's been in many years, and it's been continuing to decline. But complaint handling has dropped even more. And that goes back, I think, to what you were saying about customers now won't just put up with, something that's gone wrong and just say nothing and just get on with it. They have more ease of access, I guess, in terms of getting in touch, because we can probably both remember the old days where you tell a customer if they wanted to complain, they had to put it in writing. And that would then go to the, to the team that would then deal with it. That, of course, is not the right way to deal with any dissatisfaction. And thankfully now, for the majority of businesses, there is ease of access for customers to let a business know if they're not happy. But yes, complaint handling has dropped by around just over 5 points, I think it is, since last year. So that's an indication of why equipping your teams with the confidence, with the skills, with the right level of skills is even more important in order to make sure that businesses do increase their customer satisfaction. Let's hope that the July 24 report shows a little bit of an increase. We can only keep our fingers crossed. But we've sort of talked about the importance of difficult interactions. We've sort of given a couple of clues as to what some of those might be. But in your experience, what type of conversations come under that difficult umbrella?
I think shouting is one. Swearing is another one. And I think if you take the shouting one, for example, I often start by asking, where do you think the shouting comes from? What do you think it is? And, often people say, it's just rude. The service provider, it's just rude. And I think my view of that is that if we put something in our mind that the customer is rude, that is the major difficulty. We're making it harder for ourselves, because that judgment, the customer is rude, the customer is abusive, the customer is annoying, all of those things, whilst that may or may not be true, if that's the first thing we think about, that will show in our face, it will show in our body, it'll show in our voice, and it'll show in the words as well. So therefore, I think my advice would be either think two things. First of all, think the customer is stressed, because they are. We've all experienced stress. So therefore, stress is a really non-judgmental word, and it's the more supportive word. So if they can see, the customer has been stressed, that's going to really help. The second thing, which is what I do, is I don't have anything in my head. I have just an empty head with no judgments whatsoever. So anyway, I'm making it easy for myself, because I'm focusing on the person and the problem rather than myself, because that helps me as well as the customer to get a win-win. So I try not to really go down the judgment route, because I just think it's that thing about, the Stephen Covey mentioned, responsibility can be cut down as responsibility. You have the ability to choose the response you want to make. So the first thing is think nothing, or have a non-judgmental approach. I think the customer is stressed. That's it. So that's the first thing. And then if we can do that, that impacts about 90% of the interaction that comes next. So we will be speaking with more empathetic words. We'll have a more empathetic tone, because we won't be caught up with ourselves and our interrupting thoughts. And that, I think, is the most thing, is they say somebody shouting. The next thing they say is swearing, and, I don't get paid to take this. So we've got a choice. We can either tell the customer off like a parent and say, if you continue to talk to me like this, I will put the phone down. Now, whilst that's a choice, it's certainly not a choice I would make, because that's like a parent telling a child. And we know what children do. If they don't like something, they'll have a strop. They'll call back, speak to somebody else, it'll escalate, and then it'll go all the way to a regulatory body. So that's the first thing, is I wouldn't speak to them as a parent because I'm going to get it back. Yeah. Secondly, why would I not want to take that challenge up? I want to try and win that customer round. And I see it like a little competition to myself. Can I deal with this? Well, I've dealt with worse. So like, bring it on. So I don't even mention the swearing. And the other thing we do, I'm trying to help you, but I'm finding it difficult with you shouting. So again, there's a little bit of a criticism of the customer in there. So I tend to just ignore it as though it hasn't happened. And I tend to speak in a very proactive way. I'm really with you. I'm getting what you're saying. I'm now going to help you. And that's the thing that I find works the best. So shouting customers, swearing customers, maybe people who talk. And you probably hear this all the time, Jackie, with some service providers say, customers just want a vent. That's all they want to do, is they want a vent. And I think, really? Do you really think that somebody wakes up and says, yeah, do you know what? Phone up that utility company and I'm just gonna, where's that phone? Right. I just want a vent. So much better now. That doesn't happen. They're not going to waste their time. They're more likely to vent at the dog. So I think the best thing to do is to, again, that's a judgment that they're making that is not helping. It's just hindering. So we can be our worst enemies at times. Yeah. So I think the most important thing in training is getting the mindset right. Getting people to think the right things in their head or think nothing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in terms of, because my background is very much contact center based. So I've worked in insurance, financial services, retail, utilities that you've just mentioned. And I know that, pretty much every contact center that I worked in had a policy for abusive callers. And I think, what might be something that can just go over my head, I don't have the right to say to another team member that you shouldn't find that upsetting, or you shouldn't find that particular word that they used distressing. And so most contact center environments usually have a policy that it's almost like 3 strikes and the call is disconnected. So I'd love to know your thoughts in terms of, I absolutely agree that, don't shout or calm down. Initial response is not the way to go, and actually trying to help the customer and understand their stress and focus on what you can do for that customer, rather than, there's another one, a response I think that always makes me sort of smile, is when somebody says, oh, I understand your frustration, but unfortunately, so what you said in terms of, really acknowledging that customer's feelings, understanding their stress and where that's coming from, but focusing on what you can do in terms of a solution is really, really important. But what would you say to a business that, or even to a staff member that has tried that approach, hasn't told the customer to calm down, has reiterated that they want to help and work with them to find a solution, but that's shouting, that swearing, that personal abuse continues?
Yeah. And I think that, as you know, in contact centers, there are people that can just let it go over their head and it really doesn't faze them, or people who try their best to say, I'd like to help you, but I'm finding it difficult with shouting, but that kind of thing. Or they'll do the parental, I'm going to put the phone down if. And I think that team leaders in contact centers, they'll know the team members who fit into one of those 3 categories. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is down for team leaders, managers, to support those people who are finding it harder to stay resilient and put some coaching time into that. Because it could be that the people who are finding it really difficult either want to continue to escalate it to a team leader because they just find it too hard, then that's down for the organization to accept, if that's what they would like to do. And most of them say, yes, that's fine, escalate it to me if you want to. Yeah. But sometimes they'd quite like to be able to handle it themselves. They don't want to escalate it. They know their boss is busy and they're feeling lacking in confidence, but they don't know how because they've never been taught how. So that's what I would focus on as a team leader is, which way is this going to be just too hard for this person for whatever reason? And I'll support them by taking those calls. Yeah. But what I might do is brief him or her about what are the things to say before that call does get escalated, which might be less, difficult to then transfer. Or does this person really want to learn this stuff? Because I can support that and I can build that resilience. And maybe, that could involve some one-to-one coaching where the team leader's taken a difficult call and they're watching and they're interviewing the team leader and saying, what did you notice? This is what I did. So I think there are all those three choices, but it's a difficult area and it's becoming a more difficult area as time goes on. And the trends, as you know, are, particularly in contact centers, the more automation, by the time people actually get through, those complaints are more. So this problem isn't going to go away.
Absolutely. And that leads nicely, I think, into what you think are the really critical skills that are needed for a customer service team member as we're already, a lot of businesses have already introduced the AI, but as we get further into that scenario where the everyday simple queries, etc., are dealt with by the AI. So the AI is supporting staff, but yes, more of those calls that want to speak to a human being, therefore, are going to be in that difficult category. So what do you think are the really critical skills that are needed for this day and age compared to when we started our careers 30 years ago, when I think it was much more simple?
That's right. So I think if we know that the trends are that complaints are only going to get worse and customers are going to be even more stressed by the time they've got through this 1 hour of the bot, I think, unlike years ago, I think the training should really be much more about how do you react? What mindset do you have when a customer is shouting like this? So trying to manage that first. And secondly, having some real empathetic phrases and questions rather than leaving people to their own devices. Because things like, I can understand your frustration, can be overused. And some, I understand.
I know how you feel.
I know how you feel. Or even, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, because sometimes it's been way more than an inconvenience to that customer, way more. And those are generic customer service responses. So practicing how to say things like, that must have been really hard to wait all that time. I'm so sorry that you had to wait. That's the kind of thing you would say to a friend. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing you can say to a customer. That must have been, because they're not expecting you to say that. They're expecting those, I'm really sorry to have inconvenienced you, but let's surprise them and go one step further and saying, really sorry you've had to wait. That must have been really hard to wait in all that time. That's not what you paid for. Now, that's the first thing, is getting those empathetic phrases with a heart and a soul and with no judgment. And the second thing is get straight into solving the solution. Mm-hmm. So you can get straight into then, let's get this sorted for you right now. And the thing about the word now is it's the last thing you say and it's the first thing they think about. Yes. Empathy, action, empathy, action. And it's actually, once people get the swing of it, it's quite easy then to do that on a roll, but doing it a really personalized way. And even this general, we apologize for this problem. There's the word we could say, I'm really sorry. So I rather than we, and sorry rather than apologize, within the scope of what's possible with their business, but using some of these mindsets and language that seems like the customer's not a number, they're a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pause there because we've got a question and I'm going to hopefully show it on the screen. So what's your thoughts, Debbie, about vexatious customers, and do you have a strategy for managing this customer type?
Oh, I've never heard of what does the word vexatious mean? That's a new one for me.
So I'll give you an example of a customer that when I was working for a water utility company. So we had a customer that And thankfully, these are in the very small minority, but she would actually ring virtually every single day to the centre. She would start off very, very polite, and then within a minute would switch into very abusive. And she would do that sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, every single sort of day. So it got to a point where actually within that business, we had that sort of list, if you like, of customers that were classed as vexatious in terms of potentially, somebody that is contacting a company on a regular basis without necessarily a real issue. But it was certainly one of those situations that we had to include in our training. We had to tell all new staff who this customer was and what they needed to do as soon as she came through. So it's that customer, I think, that is a more, I'm trying to think of the word, but is a more regular sort of complaining customer, if you like.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I think that would be, for me, a company decision about what is the best way, because there could be lots of reasons why this person is repeating this. Is it to do with the fact that there are mental health issues? Is it to do with the fact that this problem just has never gone away? And so therefore, I think what I would be tempted to do is to have a company approach to it and have a manager contact the customer directly to say, Mrs. Smith, I know you've contacted us quite a few times, and I'm here to find out how I can best support you with that. And what is it you need from us? And I'd probably do it that way, because I don't think that there is a one size fits all for that type of issue. And it could simply be that they've spoken to 7 people and no one has impressed them. So it could be that that's this one person that's different, an agent that's very different. It could even be some stats I heard recently on apologies, how many times people actually want an apology and that's all they want. They don't want compensation sometimes. They don't want it to be fixed. They just want to hear someone say sorry. But only 32% of agents are willing to say sorry because they don't feel it's their fault and they don't want to be apologizing on behalf of another company. So it could be that all that customer is looking for is a really solid apology. But I would say the strategy would be have a manager contact and find out what the issue is and what they can support.
I'm certainly within the utility company I worked in, that's exactly what they had. So there was a senior manager. So everybody was told when they recognized this person that comes through, and sometimes she would deny who she was. She would give a different name. But I think everybody in that business recognized her voice. So it would automatically be that it would then be put through to that senior manager. So everybody was told, don't engage in conversation with this person, because all it will do is encourage her to keep ringing, because she knows she's getting somebody that's paying attention, continuing with that abuse. So yes, it became a situation that there was a particular manager that would always deal with that particular customer. Jasmine has put vexatious is very annoying, someone consistently causing problems. And it can be a difficult one, because often there isn't really a root complaint there. It's more and it could actually be even identified as somebody that may have a serious mental health issue that's actually contacting. I don't know this lady's background. They used to ring the utility company, but I'm guessing there may have been some mental health issue that obviously needed support for that particular customer. But that's why I think it's important that if they are deemed to be vexatious, you usually have a senior manager in the business that then is the main contact for that person.
Yes, I think that there was one example of a mental health issue for a contact center that I worked for, is that a customer kept calling up because the washing machine kept breaking the whole time, and this customer got quite, they said, abusive. But you can imagine someone with OCD, a washing machine's not working, that's a real crisis to them. And it's one of those things that you're never really going to know unless you get someone very talented and very skilled and very experienced to get down to the root of that problem.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, when you talked about empathy, it's so important to listen to it from the customer's perspective. You don't have to agree with somebody to empathize. You don't have to, you know, agree in terms of how you might react to that situation yourself, because it's not about you. It's about the person, and it's about listening and understanding it from their perspective. Jasmine has asked, is there a point in customer service where you just have to give up?
Oh, yes. Well, it depends what we mean by giving up. I think what I notice is that sometimes service providers, they want to feel like they're winning. You know, they want to feel like they've had the last say, or, you know, they try to kind of like bite back, or, you know, if someone's going to be rude to me, I'm going to be rude back to them, that kind of thing. And I think being humble is quite important. You know, we're not going to win everyone. We can't convince everyone. We can do everything we can. You know, we can offer the compensation, or we can offer, you know, the great apology. But sometimes a customer will just not be happy. Yeah. And maybe I'm not thinking maybe giving up, but we might accept, you know, that thing about the circles of control. You can control, or you can influence. And if you can't do control or influence, you can just accept the way it is. Yeah. And I remember on one training course, because it's great to have music in training, you know, that Frozen song, Let It Go. We actually played that song. We're just saying, let it go, let it go. It's like, sometimes you just have to let it go.
Yeah. Can you have some dancing in training as well, Debbie?
There was one group where somebody said, I am not going to apologize unless it's my fault personally. And the rest of the group's, what? You know, you're making it difficult for yourself, Linda. And after the break, we played Justin Bieber's song, Sometimes It's Hard to Say Sorry. And then the Elton John one, sorry is the hardest word. And we all had a bit of a movement to that. And that meant a lot to Linda, who found it really difficult to apologize. But after that, she kind of thought differently about it, because saying sorry in a really heartfelt way, if that's what's needed, do it, because we win.
Absolutely. It's great to see some questions coming through, and I'm happy to continue this conversation if you are, Debbie, because the one thing I wanted to sort of talk about is how important do you think, we've talked about empathy, but what about emotional intelligence? How important is it for customer service, whether that's in a contact center, whether that's working in an airport, whether that's working in hospitality? How important is it to develop good, strong emotional intelligence skills?
Oh gosh, that's so important, isn't it? And I used to, when I was much younger, thought it was so easy for someone to learn emotional intelligence. Now I'm older, I realize it's not always easy for everybody, because sometimes there are some, you know, learning issues which prevent someone from having as much emotional intelligence as the next person sitting next to them. But I think that whether we call it emotional intelligence or not, everybody can learn to listen more, and everybody can learn to listen, because, you know, there's 3 different types of listening. There's just hearing, then there's active listening, which training always used to be about active listening, but then there's empathetic listening, which is listening to how something's being said and things that are just not said. And everybody can learn that with really good training. Even people that find it difficult naturally to listen can learn that. And empathy, again, sometimes people think in a very black and white about empathy. This person deserves it, this person doesn't. I think everybody can learn how to say empathetic things. Like, that must have been hard. That must have been really difficult for you. Of course you're frustrated. Yes, you've had to wait 3 days. And even if people have to learn that over and over again, people can learn that. But it's natural for other people. And they are usually the people that find service complaints the easiest one, because it comes more naturally to them. But with some people, they need more support on how to do that. Practically, these are the words that you would say to somebody in that situation. They might need more time, but it's very important.
Absolutely. And I think as well, from you know, the other aspect of emotional intelligence is being equipped with the tools to manage our own emotions, because you know, going back to those days where you were dealing with complaint after complaint after complaint, we're human beings ourselves. We need to speak on a human level with our customers, but after taking that call, for example, and if you're doing that on a regular basis, that will affect how we feel and how a customer service team member will feel. So yes, the team manager needs to recognize when people need to take a break, when they need to take time out, rather than there's 10 calls queuing, just keep taking the call. Because you take that emotion into the next conversation. So it's equipping, for me, it's also about equipping teams to have those tools, those strategies that they can manage their own stresses, their frustrations, and how they feel in the moment, rather than just trying to suppress them and just keep going. Because even though they may not consciously recognize the impact that's having on the service they're delivering, it absolutely will.
It's absolutely vital. And you know what? I think people want to learn that as well. And I often carry a book around on classroom training called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Richard Carlson. You might have heard of it. And it's a beautiful book, very, very short. And sometimes we'll read something from it about this kind of topic. And I remember one thing he says is, choose being kind over being right. And when you really think about it, we don't have to prove a point to a customer, and you just accept they found it difficult. And then the other one that he talks about is look beyond behavior. So don't judge the person because of the way they're shouting or their behavior. There's a person there, because he also said, if you have a child, if you've ever raised a child that has had a strop, if you judge them on their behavior, you could never love that child. So it's looking beyond behavior to what it is they need, the fact that it's stress. And when I've introduced this book, half of the delegates on training courses say, oh, what's the name of that book? Oh, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to get it. So that shows people really do want that. And I think there's a big expectation, particularly in contact centers, that people come with those skills and that we only need to teach them to smile down the phone and speak in this speed. And there's so much more to that. It's like the iceberg. That mindset, self-control, self-awareness, all of that kind of the emotional intelligence is below the surface. And often the training covers just the top bit. Great book, by the way. Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Brilliant. Short as well.
So I'm sure those that are watching this at the moment are probably busy writing that down. But I guess I did say at the start, didn't I, that that we could go on talking for quite some time. But I think because people that are watching this right now probably have lots of things that they need to go and do on a Friday. One of them, I hope, is to go and check out my Friday playlist post, which is all about Friday fun and 80s music. And I'm not going to ask you your age, Debbie, but I'm guessing 80s is probably somewhere around your era. So let's leave our audience with, 2 or 3 specific actions that you feel the businesses can put into place, can take away with them today, that's really going to help their teams that go to work on a daily basis to do a darn good job. Nobody goes to work aiming to do a bad job. But what can we do to support those teams to deliver the best level of service they can, even during those more difficult conversations?
I think number one starts with recruitment, doesn't it? Recruiting the type of people that have got naturally a really good customer service ethic and being able to prove that they think about customers in a really positive, productive way. So that's the first one. Recruit those people if you can. Secondly, have very, very clear expectations about what is the approach that you go through with customer service? What do you expect in terms of behaviors? Number 3, induction. Really treat customer service and the things that we've spoken about, resilience, all the mindset stuff within the induction, because 6 months later, it's often too late. And number 4, have managers and team leaders, invest in your team leaders and managers to really support people with how difficult it is now. So they're the role models. They're the ones that are credible role models for customer service. So all eyes are on them. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic tips there, Debbie. So thank you ever so much for, as I say, stepping in at the last minute, so to speak. And I've got no doubt that our audience has found the information and advice and the tips that you've shared today of great value. But how can any of the audience, whether they're watching that right now live or whether they watch the recording later, how can they get in touch with you if they want to find out more about the work that you do?
Yeah, they could look at the website, which is virada.co.uk. That is V for Victor, IRADA.co.uk, or they can email us at hello@virada.co.uk. But we'd love to hear from you because, Jackie, we love to talk about customer service, don't we?
Which we've proved today. I'm guessing you hang around on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So LinkedIn, yes, they can contact me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah. But thank you ever so much. Fantastic questions that came through today as well. And the ones that got us thinking, particularly that vexatious one. But thank you ever so much, everybody that's taken the time to join us. I will be back again, flying solo my next one in a couple of weeks' time. But it's just for me to say thanks to everybody. And of course, a very big thank you to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you for everyone attending.
Bye.
Bye.